Good evening, everybody. It's 6:01 p.m. on September 22nd, 2022. I'm Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is Vice Chair Amelia Aboff, Clerk Erin Gino, Jahan Habib, and Debbie Howard Easton. And pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Somerville Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of the agenda. This meeting is being recorded. So we have a number of items on our agenda tonight. 59 Bow Street, which is Planning and Zoning 21-017. Which I believe was previously opened but continued, has requested a further continuance to the October 13th meeting. So the chair moved to continue 59 Bow Street to the October 13th meeting, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Wonderful. That agenda item is continued. We will also have a discussion on 394 McGrath Highway, which has been previously opened and heard. Testimony has been taken, and we have the applicant coming back to us with some discussion and an updated pieces of information based on some concerns and questions from the board of last meeting. We will bring that up. We will also bring up 3 different agenda items relating to different applications, but all part of 50 Webster Avenue. We'll hold that till the end because Amelia is recused from that project, so it makes sense for us to handle the business that we can with a full board and then allow Amelia to recuse herself and follow up with those 3 items. And we also have an item of other business, which will be a presentation by Charlotte on 299 Broadway, which was by request of the planning board. So it is the discretion of the chair to take agenda items out of order, and I would like to invite Charlotte to be unmuted to share whatever she would like to share on video. I don't know if she has a presentation or just a discussion. But Charlotte, if you would like to address the board, you are recognized to do so.
Mr. Chair, this is Charlotte Lee speaking. I actually do not have a presentation, but I will be here to answer questions. The applicant team is available and does have a presentation. If we could make, let's go with Adam Dash and Robert Korf panelists so that one or both of them can share their screens and talk you through. For anyone who is listening, this is a comprehensive permit. It's under Mass General Law, Chapter 40B. So it has a slightly different process than most projects that come to this board. And all tonight is an introductory presentation to the planning board about the project, as the planning board will be one of the important advisory boards to the Zoning Board of Appeals once this application is formally submitted in the coming weeks. And with that, Adam or Robert, if you guys are ready to present.
And actually, Charlotte, before I have them present, I just want to clarify and follow up on something that you just said, that this is not something on which the planning board will hold a vote. We are not the permit granting authority or the decision maker here. We are at this point, based on the posture of this application, an advisory board to the ZBA. Is that right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Adam Dash, representing Mark Development and Beacon Communities, who are the co-developers of the 299 Summer Broadway site, which is probably more colloquially known as the Old Star Market site, where also the Walgreens is on Winter Hill. With me is Robert Korf from Mark Development. If we could also, Charlotte, unmute, I guess, some of the members of the team. I believe Mimi Love and David Roach and Adam Benjamin and Robert, do you know who has the slides? Is it Mimi?
I think Mimi has them, Adam.
And Mimi Love from UTIL, who's the architecture team. We want to sort of, I know you haven't seen this project, but it's quite exciting. We've had a number of neighborhood meetings. We've been to the Urban Design Commission. We've been to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority and the Winter Hill Community Advisory Committee, and we're very happy to be with you on this because we are going to be moving this thing forward, and it's great. I guess while we're waiting for Mimi, Robert, do you want to sort of tee it up and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Adam. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here before you tonight for the first time. Expecting to have several other meetings, of course, as we proceed with the ZBA on the process. My name is Robert Korf, by the way. I'm a principal of Mark Development, and we are the co-developer along with Beacon Communities, the proposed co-developers for the 299 Broadway site. So I'm not going to take too much of your time here because I really would love to get your input on, where we're at in the project from an architectural and site planning standpoint. If Mimi's on, you could.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mimi. Can you
Can
put
you
up?
see my screen?
Yes.
You can't see the screen with the title?
I can, but not the presentation.
The screen we see is just a desktop with some.
Ah, okay. Let me try to get the right one. Let me just move this to this. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yep,
Yeah.
we're in business.
Okay, let's do the
Yeah.
slideshow.
All right.
Here we go.
All right. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, that's it. You got it. All right. So I'm just going to speak to this slide to give you a sense of the public outreach as well as other boards within Somerville that we've done. This project, it actually started back in March of 2021 when I contracted with the current owner of the site to purchase. We have a contract on this location that takes us to approximately mid-March of 2023. So, this has been moving fast, and we really appreciate all the cooperation we've been getting, with city boards as well as the community. There seems to be a lot of enthusiasm here towards the project, which, we as a company are very excited about and truly do pride ourselves on all our developments, to reach consensus with the community. So this slide here really is just put up to sort of show you an outline of, what we've been doing in the calendar years 2021, 2022. As you can see on the bottom, we've had a total of actually 16 meetings now, if I include last night's SRA meeting, with various groups amongst the city. A lot of meetings with the neighborhood and the CAC advisory committee, which make up 10 of those 16 meetings. We've been before the Somerville Redevelopment Authority 4 times, including last night, and the Urban Design Commission. We've met with 2 times, and we're back before them for a 3rd time next week. At the last meeting, which was a couple of weeks ago, they did vote on and gave us a favorable recommendation to the ZBA on the architecture of the buildings, and we're coming back next week primarily, I think, to clean up, the site plan and hopefully get a favorable recommendation from them on site as well, which will then, complete the process, I believe, or the preliminary process with UDC. So our next milestone that we're waiting for at this point before we can begin the ZBA process is getting a project eligibility letter from DHCD. that process. We filed the application with them back in July. The process has been going smoothly to date. We're currently in the 30-day comment period. That the city has an opportunity over the next 30 days to comment back to DHCD on the application. And if things go well there, we are expecting our project eligibility letter the end of October, which should put us hopefully on track to file with ZBA immediately and perhaps have our first hearing before ZBA sometime in November. So, the one point I just want to make perfectly clear here is, 40B is being used in consultation with the city as the avenue to permit this project. And I'll let Charlotte speak to any reasoning behind that if interested. It in no way is being used on our behalf as sort of a leverage tool in negotiations. We fully expect and welcome a process, as robust as the city would like. We're prepared to meet with as many advisory boards, community boards, that the city would like us to, and, welcome input from all. So I just wanted to make that perfectly clear because 40B sometimes can, just create an antagonistic reaction. And, I would say this project is about as far from that as you could possibly be to date. It's been a very rewarding, cooperative, and very productive effort since we started in the public realm back in June of 2021. So I won't bore you with any more of the preamble and details, and I'll turn this over to Mimi to take you through the project. Mimi?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I think most of you are familiar with the site, but it's highlighted here in the center off of Broadway, walking distance to Gilman Square. Here's a view of Broadway. I think the thing to note, it's quite an incline up Broadway that, one of our challenges has been dealing with the actual site and the grading. So we'll share that with you. You can see the Star Market here, and in the distance, the Rite Aid, and at the corner is an existing building with the liquor store. So looking in plan, the site is bound by Broadway and Temple. We have Sewell and Grant as well. It's primarily a parking lot right now. This is the former Star Market. Here is currently the Rite Aid, and the multi-tenant building at the corner. There is a strong desire line to cut through the mid of the block to create a pedestrian connection. So that's what we're showing here. And then there is a bus stop on Broadway. Here's the site plan as it's been developed. And just to highlight on some of the public green spaces, we have a civic plaza along Broadway. There is this through block connection, as I mentioned. We call it the Muse. And then there's a neighborhood park that faces Sewell Street that you can see here. The whole project is comprised of 2 buildings that we break up in terms of mass, but just for plan's sake, we have this called Building A and Building B. Building A is the affordable building. It has a courtyard for the residents' use, and Building B is on the eastern half of the site with a courtyard as well. Both face the Civic Plaza, but have different entry points. We have the main lobby for Building B off of Broadway with a secondary exit facing the Civic Plaza. And the main entrance for Building A is off of Temple Street with another entrance exit off of the Civic Plaza. So just for comparison, we just wanted to give you a sense of scale. It is a large site. That Civic Plaza is around 7,000 square feet, with the neighboring neighborhood park, totaling around 18,000 square feet. Just for comparison's sake, we have Bow Market, which is around 8,000 square feet, so we're about twice that. Davis Square, the Statue Park, you can see images below, and Symphony Park. So collectively, all of the outdoor public realm spaces are almost twice in scale comparison. The other thing we wanted to highlight is we have looked up and down Broadway and looked for comparable sizes of building along Broadway that you can see here. All of these buildings with their addresses are to scale, so you can take this footprint and compare it to our proposed building. And we're suggesting, at least in plan, to divide this building to look like a complex or a composition of buildings rather than two single buildings, just to divide the scale and mass. I'm going to walk you through the ground floor uses, which we're pretty excited about. Along Broadway, we have mostly retail spaces. We have 3 of our bigger retail spaces facing the Civic Plaza, lobby entrance for Building B. Then along Temple Street, as I mentioned, we have the lobby for Building A. It has a retail component at this corner. And then it's mostly amenity spaces on the ground floor. We have a large bike parking area, Building A. The bike parking in Building B is off of Grant Street in this loading area here. Ground floor amenity spaces as well as courtyards. There is a 3,000 square foot community room that faces Sewell Park. This is a neighborhood amenity, and that through block connection, which we see as a landscaped connection through the center of the block. Just to talk a little bit about massing, this image shows you the variety of massing that we're trying to promote on the site, where we break down the scale of the building, have different material palettes, but yet create a unified and cohesive look to the block. This is just to orient you. This is Temple with an entrance of Building A. You can see the slope of the terrain. We're dropping 12 feet along Broadway, so the windows get larger, and we're playing tricks about up and down and creating a civic moment in the center of the block. And then a view, this is where a bird looking back on the backside of the project. So Broadway is at the far side of the screen. We're on Sewell Park. This is that neighborhood park that we're working with Future Green to develop and programmatically make an interesting, moment for the neighborhood that suits their needs. This is the entrance to the community space, that 3,000 square foot amenity. You can see the courtyard for Building A here, as well as the necessary step backs to meet zoning requirements. Here's an elevation along Broadway. We really have worked to have a variety of window approaches. The windows vary in size from Building A to Building B. We have a mix of window sizes in this component of Building B, but stay uniform here. Again, these are architectural moves to be able to create variety, but yet have a cohesive approach. There are moments where we're emphasizing a corner as an important, landmark for the site. This is a view of the Civic Plaza with the Muse through block connection that you can see here. So at the end of that pathway, you're heading down to Sewell Park. We see retail at the ground floor as shown here. This is as well in development. And then this is looking at the Sewell Street Park, looking back into the Muse area. One thing just to note is there are residents along this muse, and it's a different typology. They're townhouse units, which we're pretty excited about. So they really do have, they will activate the muse as well as make it a public connection. This is the community space that you see here. And I think that's really what we have for you today, and happy to open it up to questions, or if I need to flip back to any slides, please, let me know.
Thanks, Mimi. I guess this is Adam Dash again. I just wanted to make clear, if you want to go back to the site plan, because we get this question a lot as to why the corner where the liquor store is not included in this. That's actually two different owners with two different lots and two different buildings. They're not part of the property we're buying. We're not even sure they're for sale. They are part of the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan, as is the rest of the site. So that's an ongoing process with the city, but we're not including that because we don't have any right to buy them. So just to make that clear, that's not part of the property. Where Walgreens is. However, and Walgreens as part of this will be relocating, we are told by Walgreens, relocating to their prior Walgreens next to the Winter Hill Bank Loan Center, just about a block or so up the street where they used to be, and then they closed. So they'll be closing this and going back. So actually the neighborhood does not lose the Walgreens, which they were very excited about.
Yes, and I'll add to that, Adam, that we as private developers are paying for that relocation cost.
True,
and have
good point.
negotiated the deal with Walgreens.
And I should also note that there's a small part, I don't know if you can go to the different plan, Mimi, which shows the affordable lot going to Sewell Street. Yeah, you just show that little dotted area. Yeah, that is part of our site that we are buying. And the idea was to work either with the Community Land Trust, give it to the city, give it to the Land Trust, or something for doing an affordable development there along Sewell Street. Currently, it's just a paved lot, but clearly it's a missing tooth there with the houses on the street. But that's something that we would be giving up for affordability in addition to the affordable building A.
Yeah, would it make sense, to describe the affordable package that we're offering here for the board, or would you prefer we hold that?
Yeah, I'm curious to know what your anticipated unit counts are and how you intend to break up,
Oops, give me 1 second.
et cetera. If you have that information available, and then I'll have some more questions probably of staff after we ask our questions initially.
There's the slide with it. Yeah, we definitely have that information, Mr. Chair. Robert, you want to go through it?
Yeah, we're broken up into two separate buildings. The Beacon building, which will be all affordable, and income ranges from 30 to 60% of AMI. They are pursuing a deep affordable package with the DHCD, which I think is wonderful. So there are 115 units, and it's important to note that although from a unit standpoint, we're about 60-40, 60% being in favor of market in the Mark building, which has 173 all market rate units. They really represent very close to 50% of the affordable net rentable square footage. And the reason why it's close to 50-50 on the net residential square footage, but 60-40, 60 being market on the unit count, is the fact that Beacon has also skewed their units to be in larger units, 2-3 bedrooms, and we're skewed on the market side much more to studios and ones. And the reason for that being, of course, there's a much more dire need for these larger family type units on the affordable side. So we really did put a lot of thought into the mix and the AMI as well. And in addition to all this, there's 14,000 square feet of retail, 6,000 in the Beacon building, 8,000 in the Mark building. But the ownership structure on the retail will be all Mark Development will own and control the retail, all of it. And we'll create a condominium for the 6,000 square feet of retail in the Beacon building for ownership purposes.
Thank you. My other question to you right now is, if you are proposing 288 units between the two buildings, and I'm looking at, it might have been a different slide, but two big bike groups, right? Are you proposing any vehicle parking at all?
No, and really it's very interesting how this deal organically came about. When we first presented this project to the community in June of 2021, we anticipated having a parking garage with a 0.5 parking ratio. And let's just, for the sake of numbers, round it at 300 units. So we were proposing 150 parking stalls. And it was going to be a project that would have met the city ordinance for affordability at 80-20. So 20% of our units being affordable. And what happened subsequent to that and towards the latter part of 21, beginning of 22, is we went out and we did some extensive geotechnical boring work out there. And long story short is what we uncovered was that back in the early 60s, when we essentially had no environmental laws in place, the previous owner had torn down a large movie theater and backfilled the site, with the rubble from the theater. And what we discovered was there were traces of asbestos in the movie theater when it was backfilled. And what that really meant was, in order to get a underground parking garage on site, every inch of soil that we excavated from the site would have to be disposed of, assuming it was all asbestos. And really, it's a small percentage, probably a volume of asbestos amongst the total volume of dirt. But the way the environmental laws work, you have to treat every inch of dirt that you're removing there as though it's fully contaminated with asbestos, which meant we had to bring it to a landfill that charges an exorbitant cost to dispose of, which then created an estimated $18 million premium for construction of that garage. And the economics of the project, it was impossible to bear. So what ended up happening is we fell in love with this project and the community engagement, and we just didn't want to let go because we felt there was so much good coming out of this project. And what we sort of convinced ourselves of here, and we feel strongly, is the demographic or the data on parking shows that there's a much lower demand for parking for affordable units than there are for market rate units. The demand side on affordability with parking really drops off from market to affordable. So the key to us was to create a project then that reduced the parking demand. And that's what we accomplish through what I think is a magnificent solution here. By providing more affordability, we drive down the parking demand so that our request to the ZBA for a waiver to allow for residents to apply for on-street parking passes is significantly reduced, from a data standpoint. We then went out and did an extensive parking survey of the on-street parking supply that we'd be happy to share with you this evening if you'd like. And what we showed in that survey, in a 5 minute walk radius, there's an abundance of supply of parking both during the day and overnight. And I think when you see the data hopefully you'll agree that, you know, it really comes down to, and this is obviously a city decision that they're going to need to make at the ZBA, is, you know, the trade-offs here are, you know, cars versus people, and people in need, affordability. And, you know, when I think about this is, yes, there'll be more, the city has an abundance of supply of parking that they control, the on-street parking. And, you know, in my mind, for any municipality, that this is a, you know, it could be a real poster child example of how a city can use its excess parking supply, you know, as an economic development tool, or in this case, as a tool to create more affordability. And that to me is the punchline here. And, you know, at the end of the day, the project initially compared to today, I think it really was taking a situation that I would describe as being a lemon due to the asbestos conditions that we uncovered, and turned it into lemonade here. And I think by far, because of the depth of affordability here, we're ending up with a much better project for the benefit of the community. So hopefully that's a compelling argument to you all as to, you know, why we have no parking and why we are seeking, you know, a waiver from the ZBA for on-street parking. And I'll add lastly that, and I'm sure we'll be discussing this with the ZBA, you know, we're fully willing, able, and want to, you know, create some sort of robust TDM plan that will, you know, encourage people to use transit. There's an abundance of transit, you know, in the area with the new station at Gilman, a major bus stop right in front of the site. And we certainly are willing to, you know, subsidize our tenants to some degree to induce them to use transit versus vehicles.
Thank you. What I'm going to ask of staff, and I don't know if this is something that is something that you can answer now or something that we can get an answer to in a future meeting, is this is the first time I've been on the board since 2008, and this is the first time a 40B project like this has come before us in any kind of an advisory capacity. And so I'm curious to know what the planning board's role is in providing advice to the ZBA, and what authority the ZBA will have in oversight and conditions and granting relief to applicants in this situation. Because before I start suggesting that the planning board suggest things to the ZBA, I'd like a clearer picture of exactly what our authority and theirs are.
This is Charlotte Lee speaking. I'd be happy to answer that question. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm happy to go into more detail if you want, but broadly speaking, this project is before you for an advisory meeting now because your board was very involved earlier this year in talking through what might happen on this site due to the unique conditions. So we wanted to make sure that you have an update of what's happening, what's going on, etc. Tonight is really just like an introductory hello with no expectation that you have substantive review of the project or substantive feedback. The next steps for this project will be submitting an application to our division and the ZBA will have purview over a lot of things in this project. So one of the main ways that a 40B is different from the other types of permits that both of your boards see is the ability to request waivers from a wide variety of local regulations, including things like the prohibition of units within the transit area getting on-street parking passes. That's a waiver that they could request from the ZBA. The ZBA could decide whether or not to grant that waiver. And as part of that process, the ZBA the best practices for the ZBA to take into account recommendations from other local boards, including the Planning Board, the Urban Design Commission, the Traffic Commission, other boards that might have feedback that is relevant to the project. And then the ZBA can decide whether or not to grant it. Ultimately, these are called comprehensive permits because the ZBA grants one comprehensive permit that covers all of the local discretionary approvals. So it doesn't exempt this project from anything like building permits or certificates of occupancy or any of that, but pre-building permit, the ZBA is the decision-making authority for all locally required permits. Does that answer your question? I can keep going, but it's a big topic and I don't want to go into more detail than is needed.
I appreciate the overview, and I also appreciate you making sure that we understand that this is an introductory meeting, that there will it seems like be more of these as the process moves along, such that we can dig in a little bit deeper with the applicant team, raise comments and questions of you and of the team going forward, such that we might have a better idea of what sort of a recommendation we would want to make to the ZBA. So I don't want to get, for me, I don't want to get too deep into this evening, because I don't think that's what tonight is for, from how you've described the process moving forward. But those are my initial questions. Like I said, I don't want to get too deep in this quite yet. I do appreciate everybody coming in and making this presentation, and I'd like to open it up to anybody else on the board that has some of these preliminary questions, with the understanding that we will be back.
If I could clarify one more thing just on that note. So tonight, we didn't really give you any information to review before the meeting. We were kind of like, hi, we're gonna come present stuff. It's just an introduction. Once the ZBA receives the application, the actual application, which has not yet been submitted, they talked about that they're waiting for the Pell, et cetera. That full application will be forwarded to your board at some point in the process, with a chance for you to review it and then discuss in more detail. So I just want to reiterate, tonight really is like
be an appropriate night to ask almost any questions, because we don't have an actual application in front of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, tonight is very overview, broad, big picture, and you will have an actual application with a lot more detail later on.
Okay. No, thank you for clarifying that, Charlotte, because as this is a process that is new to this board, in its review, we're trying to figure out where to go. So, does anybody? Yes, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I had another question for Charlotte on process. I thought that I understood from one of the materials that were sent over that the planning board had the option at this stage to submit a letter as part of this 30-day review period. And can you explain how that, whether that is an expectation of this board, at what stage that letter would be developed, and how that would play in, if at all, to the rest of the process?
I would be happy to. So as part of applying for, as part of asking the state to determine whether or not you're eligible to apply for a 40B, the state receives the application from the developer. They then let the municipality know that they've received an application, and that starts a 30-day comment period. We're currently in the middle of that 30-day comment period. It closes on, I believe, October 8th. And it is an option, but not expected, that the board provide comments to DHCD regarding the application. In other communities where the process may be less welcome and more contentious, it is, my understanding, fairly typical for boards to provide comments to DHCD, trying to encourage DHCD to put limits on the project. In this situation where the city has been actively working with the applicant up until this point, and it will continue to be a collaborative process, the need for DHCD to put blinders might not be the right word, but put like stricter parameters around the project is less necessary because the city has more ability to do that ourselves if there's something that is of serious concern to the community.
Thank you very much.
Does that answer your question? Okay, great.
Amelia, did you have any other questions?
I had comments and questions for the applicant, if you'll entertain them, but no further questions for staff.
Yeah, I based on what Charlotte had kind of mentioned where we are in the process, I don't want to get too deep in on this because had I known that, I probably wouldn't have asked the questions I did at this stage in the game. But if you think it's appropriate to ask them now, definitely you can do that.
I have questions that I think would be probably beneficial to consider at this relatively earlier stage, and they may be things that we pick up in more detail later, but if I may, is the number of units, particularly on the affordable side, that you are proposing at this stage the maximum that you feel to be economically feasible on this site? Or if the city, how has the ultimate density on this site been reached in concert with the city and in light of sort of the economic drivers? Would this site support more affordable housing?
Well, I think there are two bumpers in that regard. If the goal were to increase affordability within the Beacon building, and they may have further commentary on this themselves, but the one bumper being, there has been a very robust process with the community in terms of height and architecture and setbacks of the like. That really led us to this massing that you're looking at, the size of the building. And secondly, and perhaps just as important, is the fact that this is a large single deal already for DHCD, to swallow. We do have feelings of support from them on its size at this level, but I think, and Beacon could speak more accurately to this, of course, but I think pushing the envelope any further for subsidies on this one project, might be pushing the limits a little too far.
Thank you.
I should note that the Beacon Communities, if you don't know, is an affordable housing developer who we're partnering with.
Thank you. For what it's worth, if there are opportunities to explore that, I would be interested in hearing more about your thinking when we are in later stages of this process. I think this is a sort of a unique opportunity in the city, and I appreciate how much affordable is being provided on site and the limitations that you cited. But if that ever is something you're exploring, I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I think the easier approach, of course, would be rather than, listen, I for one personally, if we could deliver both buildings 100% affordable, we'd do that in a heartbeat. But it's too large a deal for DHCD at that point. So I think rather than mess with the height and the massing and all that, we would consider adding affordability to the market rate building if it were doable from a subsidy standpoint.
The other question I would just raise, and others on the board know this is something that frequently comes up when we're in a later stage of design review, is just a question of sort of how parking and loading and deliveries for a residential building of this scale will be handled. And on the site plan that Mimi had pulled up, I didn't immediately see a way in which that would obviously be addressed, and would just encourage you to think about functionally how Broadway operates and the number of deliveries, drop-offs, ride shares, the ancillary traffic that will be serving the building and stopping by briefly to make sure that it's being addressed in a safe way, which I'm sure you are, but it's something that we'll ask about in a month, so I thought I'd raise it briefly now.
We already have a curbside and on-site management plan established that we're working with mobility on, that we've submitted, that we're actually waiting for their commentary on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amelia. Everybody's screen got really small since they put the site plan up. Sorry, I don't know if anybody else is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can take it down. I was going to just point out a couple of points for Amelia that's helpful. So just so you know, there's a loading area here. We have trash room located here. So this is a trash point for move-ins and loading into. Retail is loading off of Broadway. We also have this parking lot here with what we're calling just a little service court. We've located trash in this area. In fact, I have a diagram. Give me 1 second. I can pull it up. That might be helpful to see. So this is our trash room here, and this is where we imagine picking up. Move-ins also for building A happen within the service court. We have a core specifically. We're doing something very unique and having cores that are separated in order just to handle the move-ins for building A. We feel we can accommodate it pretty well with this core for building B. So servicing this site has been really tricky, but something that we have thought through.
Thank you.
I can get rid of the slide of.
I mean, it might be helpful to, I just gotta adjust my thing. I do see.
Okay.
I just had a quick question, and this may be the particulars of 40B, but is there a reason why all affordable units are in one building as opposed to mixed market and affordable amongst the two buildings?
Yes, there's a really good reason, an excellent reason that I really think if Beacon's here and you want to hear it, they should be the ones to explain it, but it relates to the capital stack, you know, for both projects, and commingling the two, you know, was not feasible, but again, they could articulate much better than I on that point. I will note, and we're sensitive, you know, to the potential segregation of market and affordability. I will note that, you know, me personally made a commitment that the design of these buildings from the outside looking in, say on Broadway, you know, we're going through great lengths here, you know, to assure that, you know, to anyone looking at the two buildings, you're going to know which is which. And from an interior and a community perspective, we are in discussions with Beacon and fully anticipate that, you know, to some degree, we're going to be commingling our amenity packages so that, you know, we can really, you know, create a sense of community here amongst both buildings and not have them operate as two separate projects. So we are very sensitive to the issue and are doing the best we can to deal with it.
Yeah, I don't know,
Thank
Charlotte, if Leanne Hanfield or Josh Cohen from Beacon are here. I don't know.
They should be. I think I heard Leanne was here. I don't know about
Maybe
Josh.
if you could promote her, she could probably explain. Like, it sounds like the long and short of it is that the only way to get this level of affordability is to have the one building financed as such.
This is Charlotte speaking. I just promoted Leanne, so she should be able to share her screen and speak.
Hey folks, can you hear me okay? Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Hi, yeah, Leanne Hanfield with Beacon Communities. Thanks for having us. As Robert was saying, it really does come down to how you finance affordable deals. There is, you know, LIHTC investors, as it would be in the case of an affordable deal, really are structured and set up to really only benefit from affordable units. So your investor pool to buy those credits that finance the lion's share of affordable deals is small and unique. And the more you integrate, the harder it is to secure those kind of investments at the levels that you need. The other thing I would say, you know, on this deal in particular is how we are setting it up is that the affordable deal will ultimately have a disproportionate share of a purchase price that actually makes the affordable deal balance, if you will, right? Restricted rents mean you only have so much debt to support. And so in order to make this deal balance, you really have to shift more of the site's purchase price over to the Mark development deal as it would be. So that really set us up for separate structures, but an integrated site and an integrated project.
In essence, Leanne, I think it's fair to say that the market rate building serves as a piece of the affordable capital stack through a
Yes.
subsidy of taking on more of a burden of the land costs proportionally.
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Debbie. Anybody else have any? Yeah, Jahan, yes.
Actually, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair had her hand first, so I'm happy to defer.
I didn't see it. Sorry, Amelia. Go for it.
My apologies. I did have one additional question I meant to ask. I really appreciate the efforts that have been made to have the unit mix for the affordable building in particular be heavy on larger family size units. I think that's fantastic and something very much needed. Another thing I'm aware that the city really needs in its affordable housing mix is ADA accessible or otherwise increased accessibility units. And I'm sorry, I don't have the right terminology for it, but I'm aware that that's something that's really lacking, and there's a very low degree of housing stock in our affordable portfolio as a city. I don't know whether that's something that you've engaged with staff on yet, but if there is an opportunity to increase the proportion of the units that can be fully accessible, I think that would also go really far in serving a pressing need. And that's the extent of my knowledge on that topic, but I wanted to raise it. Thank you.
Leanne, would you like to respond or?
Sure. Yeah. No. I appreciate the comments. The building, as far as the Beacon building, DHCD also has requirements around accessibility and visibility units for both persons with physical disabilities as well as hearing and visually impaired units. So those will be part of the project, and certainly we can explore those percentages with the city if there is a desire and maybe a need to incorporate additional units.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the applicant, but before I ask the question, I just want to commend the applicant for providing such a comprehensive overview and for engaging with both the community and the various boards and groups that would be interested to be aware of what's going on. This is a very important site for Winter Hill as well as for the city of Somerville. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I do have two very high level questions. One is the easy one. I would just like to understand what the Winter Hill community room, what that's intended for. And then the second question is around retail. I'd like to know the vision for retail, particularly since there are a number of retail units on Broadway, and if there's any particular ideas or thoughts at this stage of the project. Thank you very much.
Okay, working backwards on the retail question. We are engaged with them. I don't know if you're familiar with Graffito. They do a lot of work, in the city, and we also use them on our projects everywhere. I think the number one headline here is, local, right? So, we kind of see this as maybe an opportunity, say, for tenants that are succeeding down in Bow Market in very confined space. This looks like it could potentially be a situation where they could graduate into something larger and grow into if they've grown out of the Bow Market situation, which of course could open up further opportunities to incubate, other retail down at Bow Market. So we see some synergies there. And of course, beyond that, all I'll say is, it's all about activation. The success of that plaza is very key to the success of this project overall. And the only way we're going to achieve that is through activation, which, to me means, food, beverage. We would like and are already out there through Graffito engaging, with a local grocer use. I think would do exceptionally well here in this space. Is a big need for it and demand for it. And I think it'd be ideal to locate, a small grocer in one of the spaces that are off the plaza, but fronting on Broadway. And allow for, the food and beverage uses to all take place, where you really need that activation within the plaza. So those are our high level overall initial thoughts on retail. And I'm sorry, but
Community room.
community room, yes. Community room, that's a really good question. We are extremely open-minded, and it's difficult in a situation like this, to reach consensus. So we're right now we're kind of being provocative about it, but hanging back and allowing the community amongst themselves, to engage and debate, and hopefully they can reach a consensus, without us dictating. That would be our goal here as we proceed in the process.
Thank you very much for the response, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
So thank you all for your presentation and for responding to our very preliminary questions tonight. We will, if you, Adam's definitely been before us before and knows we often have many. So
I think Ms. Gino has one there.
Oh, Erin, did I miss you? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was a late raise. You were getting into the thing, and I didn't want to cut off either Vice Chair Aboff or Jahan.
I'm all in for a late raise.
This is maybe more of an administrative question through you to staff, or maybe staff can defer to the appropriate person. And it's more about how the project might change after the initial application to the state, right? So putting together an application for a package for an affordable building and a market rate building with these units and these unit counts, how much does that need to stay the same after the state makes a determination?
So I will answer part of that and then defer to the applicant on the other half of it because I'm less familiar. So the general process for a 40B, you go to the state to get your project eligibility letter. That project eligibility letter kind of gives you the ability to apply for a comprehensive permit from a local municipality based on facts about your project that they find it to be eligible. You then work with the ZBA, get your comprehensive permit, and then you need a final determination of eligibility from the state to confirm that if there were any changes made during the 40B process, which is pretty common, the changes may be small, they might be big, but it is common to see changes. The state confirms at the end that the final package is still eligible through whatever means they have of determining eligibility, still eligible to do the 40B. So unknown what the changes are, if any. I expect that there will be at least some small things, but it could also be big things. That's just really an unknown, but that is expected within the framework.
If I may, just through one experience, I've had a successful experience with 40B is they do have bumpers whereby, like by way of example, I think it's 10%. If your unit count goes up or down by 10%, it would trigger a refiling. So there are certain parameters that they allow you to work within, and I'm not aware of any parameters that would relate to things like, architecture changing or site plan. They really leave that up to the purview of the applicable city boards, the municipalities. It's really all about the size of the project and the affordability levels that they're most concerned about. Has been my experience.
Yeah. Maybe thank you both. That's very helpful. You got me very excited about a project with a lot of high bedroom count, affordable units, which I think is great. And it's just really helpful to understand what those bumpers are, right? Because you can go through a process and say, okay, maybe this looks one way or another, and then sort of things change. So that clarity is helpful for me as we'll consider this moving forward. So I don't really have any other comments at this point, but thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to raise these now.
I'm glad you were able to. I'm sorry I didn't catch the late race.
It's all right.
But no, I do want to thank everybody for the presentation tonight and of staff for helping us be guided through this process, which is the first time that we as a planning board have seen it in my time here. And so I want to say I'm looking forward to having you come back to us again with an application, so we can dig in a little deeper and ask some more detailed questions.
Happy to do it, Mr. Chair, and on behalf of everybody, thank you all for your time this evening, and we'll be seeing you.
Thank you. Excited to come back and see you again soon. Bye now.
Yeah, thank you.
Let this applicant close up shop as they need to, and the next item on our agenda is 394 McGrath Highway. We had taken testimony on this application. Testimony has closed on this application. We had discussions by and between ourselves and the applicant and staff in the last meeting, and we had asked the applicant to come back to us with some thoughts and proposed potential revisions of certain concerns that we had raised on some of the transportation and loading issues specifically. So I'm wondering if we might be able to have the applicant team be unmuted, staff as well, to be able to present anything that they might need to present that may have been updated between a few weeks ago and today.
This is Raisa speaking. I see a hand raised for Ann Vigorito. Ann, you have been unmuted.
Thank you, Raisa. Thank you, Chairman Capuano, members of the Planning Board. First of all, I'm apologizing. The last meeting I was not in attendance. I had a death in the family, and Will Chalifant was kind enough to cover for me. And I know the issue arose about the delivery drop-off area. So, we went through a lot of different discussions since that time. And remarkably, Will Chalifant, who's always saving the day for me, prior to this meeting, early about an hour or two ago, came up with something that I think might please the board, and it may be a viable solution. So I'm gonna mute myself and then hand it off to Will, because we're pretty excited.
This is Raisa speaking. Will, you are sharing your screen right now. I've made you into a presenter.
Great. Thank you, Raisa. It's just waiting for the prompt to tell me I can share. Sorry. Unless you can see my screen right now? No, I didn't think so.
It went away.
Sorry, Raisa, if you could just make me presenter again, I can hit share.
This is Raisa speaking. Will, you are a presenter. You should be able to share your screen.
It's not giving me the option, but okay.
This is Raisa speaking.
Try it
You
again.
see your screen right now.
We have it.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So again, Will Chalifant from Colson Design. Nice to see all of you. As Ann mentioned, I did sort of have a mild epiphany, which was the result of an issue on another project. So it's sort of come full circle here, where I know there were very much concerns about loading, where deliveries would be made and such. And I believe the board has seen the memo from the mobility department as far as some of the issues that are part of, that come along with that. Just to refresh everyone's memory where we are here and what the current site looks like. What I first took a look at something like this, where we get some sort of horseshoe along the front of the building to provide some access, excuse me, for drop-offs. There are a few issues that come with this. One, as is mentioned in the mobility report, this is a state road. So we would have to get permission from them to do this, as well as getting an additional curb cut and adding a utility pole. Furthermore, we are actually not allowed to have loading in the front per zoning. It would create some issues with green space. And again, it's parking and loading are not allowed in the front. With that said, these transformers can be quite difficult, and especially on a net zero project, we have to provide one. So I started looking about the fact where we were planning on putting in the front and realizing that that really actually might be a problem for a few logistical reasons, and that the more likely location that this would work would be in this driveway. I realize that we aren't changing the footprint here, but I need a certain clearance for that transformer, for that vault, which will be 15 feet vertically. That's what Eversource requires. As a result, I have bumped up the second floor in this area, which creates a 25 by 9 to 10 foot area for larger trucks to queue or sit and drop off. I realize this isn't ideal, but I think it does provide a little bit more buffer from the range of vehicles that may, although they're not allowed to, may pull into this site, specifically on move-in day and the occasional rogue FedEx driver. So while backing back off onto McGrath is quite difficult, I think what this has done is created a much larger area to do so, and I haven't affected the unit count. I've simply lost some square footage, which, whoops, so, pardon, which this unit has really been affected, which I'm going to reconfigure some of these units so that the unit count remains the same. I think just from a quick standpoint here, this wall will come straight down so that this unit has a dedicated living space and sleeping space and can be a true one bedroom. Aesthetically, what does this do? So we've sort of enlarged this area here, pulled that eyebrow up to allow for this. I looked at moving the mail in a little bit. I really don't have much space with that existing, with the stair inbound to push the mail. It has allowed, like I said, for a space for a truck to sit. Any size truck, obviously not an enormous truck, but state highway is 13.6, and I'm going to be providing 15 feet. So I feel pretty confident that any delivery truck here will be able to sit in that area. And then again, just from this is really the image you want to focus in on, because this is the change. So again, we've pulled this up. This has allowed this bay to still read. We're not really changing the design program. It's actually, like I said, being beneficial. It's also, I believe, going to be required because of this transformer, because Eversource is really, they have very strict locations for things. They need to be right along the road. So I think the most logical place for this to go is here. And in a weird way, this actually doesn't solve, I'm sorry, but it improves the previous situation while also maintaining the program of the project. So I'm happy to take any questions, go over this in greater detail. I'll leave it to the board.
So Will, I just got notified that this, so I appreciate the work that you have done to address some of the, or maybe all of the concerns that may have been raised by the board and its members last meeting. I was told that this is new information that staff has not had an opportunity to review.
Yeah, I did this about an hour ago. I apologize.
Yeah. So I appreciate the honesty there. This is something that I'm going to ask for us to. I appreciate you taking a look at this, and I think this is something that we're going to want staff's opinion on for an updated staff memorandum to make sure that this complies with everything they expect and need. I don't know where they're going to come down on it. But I appreciate you coming up with a creative potential solution to the concerns that were raised at the last meeting. Because this is also new information, it may trigger a testimony again, but I'm not sure on that. We'll have to figure it out. But it definitely needs to go to the planning and zoning staff to have their input before we can take a vote on this project. So those are my comments. I appreciate you coming forward with a new proposal that hopefully addresses some of the concerns that might have been raised, but I was not the person who raised that concern, so I will invite Amelia if she wants to make any comments based on what you've presented, but this is something that's going to have to go to staff before we take a vote. But I will open it up to members of the board to make any comments they might want at this time. Yes, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the applicant through you. Mr. Chalfant, how was the transformer issue being resolved in the version that we saw last time? Was this a solution that was necessary to resolve the transformer issue separate and aside from the issue that I raised? Or I'm sorry, I couldn't quite follow.
Yes, it's separate. The previous location of the transformer was partially in the public sidewalk, which we have been allowed to do on previous projects, but the utilities in that road will interfere with that. So we had to find a location for it. So they were separate, yet they sort of commingled as far as creating a partial solution to your concern.
Got it. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I appreciate that based on the staff memorandum that was provided to us, this was a really sticky issue to resolve, and we sort of came up against a jurisdictional issue and possible solutions. So I am very grateful to the applicant for finding a creative solution that I think would alleviate the worst of the traffic safety issues that could stem from the original version. I'm also mindful that I'd love to not delay this project further based on the lateness of this solution, and I don't know, but if there were an option to take a vote that was conditional on staff approval of this scheme and otherwise reverted to the previous or something to that effect, I would feel comfortable moving forward with that, but I'm sure there's more to it that I'm not aware of.
So ordinarily I would say yes. You know, I'm always a fan of not holding a project up and leaving those kind of conditional reviews to staff. We do that all the time. So I am wondering if Raisa, you might be able to address if that is something that would be appropriate in this circumstance, or due to the late presentation of kind of this new design, if this is something that really does need to go to staff review before we take a vote.
Mr. Chairman, this is actually Sarah White speaking. I know you asked Raisa, but she just asked me if I could step in.
You're the staff on staff, yeah.
Right. No, that's totally fine. I'm glad to hear that. I think between what was what Will was able to come up with, and also the feedback from mobility, that it's moving forward, because it's been a sticky wicket. I think the challenge that we have is because of what the zoning code states about new information, and that new information triggers another staff memo, and it triggers opening of public comment again. So that's my only concern from a procedural standpoint and from a following the regulations. I am very pleased to see this solution, and if I'm not speaking out of turn, I think Ms. Aboff, who raised the concern before, is I think, and not to put words in your mouth, but I think thinks it's moved in the right direction too. I am one that is often very much in favor of, okay, make this update and then turn it into staff, but we'll approve it now. But I am a little bit concerned about that regulation, as you brought up yourself.
Yeah, that was what I was concerned with, because when we generally ask applicants to, like we did in this project, right? We asked them to come back with new materiality and things like that. Maybe change some of the layout of something. That's not necessarily new information because that's directly designed by a request by the board. At our request, this is something that we asked them to look at. It's kind of something completely, not completely different, but something that is, I think, substantively different, for which testimony should be taken. This is not just changing the the look of the siding. So I agree with you, Sarah, that as much as I would like to say this is something that should be kicked to staff for review and a vote tonight, I think that based on the nature of the revision that was presented to us, I think it is new information to the to the language of what the ordinance requires for a new memorandum and testimony. And I hate to say that because I know the reason we have this is because to some degree we did ask for it, but I think this does rise to the level of something that would require new testimony because it changes where the loading is going to be, how it's going to be, the look of that facade. And I'm just a little concerned that if we don't go through that process for this change, it will not bode well for us if something down the road would really need it and it comes to a head.
Right, or pardon me, Mr. Chairman, through you, if there were an appeal or something like that, or not following our own, yeah.
This isn't please change the siding and we'll pick 1, 2, 3, or 4 like we did last time. This is
right.
I think a little bit more substantive that that we've seen applications do, and we have taken new testimony on it.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, through you, I have to say I am very pleased that we all have these light bulb moments, and I'm waiting for my own to happen today sometime, and it just hasn't done it yet. But I'm really glad that this happened, and that Will was able to come up with this. Whoever knew that Eversource and their darn transformers would end up, dealing us a good hand for figuring out something else.
Let's not thank them yet. There's a big article saying that all our gas electric bills are going to go through the roof.
Oh yes, I shall retract that statement.
But yeah, so I think in a kind of an abundance of caution, based on the nature of the change that was made, that this is new information that that staff had not seen, that the board had not seen, that the appropriate city departments had not seen, the public has not seen, outside of it's kind of not ministerial. So what I'd like to do is I think we need to take some testimony on it. I don't know if anybody's here to provide testimony, but I think we should, and I would like a review by staff just to make sure that we are not violating our requirements on our own ordinance based on new information. So what I'd like to do now is there any discussion by members of the board before I open it up to public testimony? Okay. What I would like to do is open up this hearing for public testimony for anybody that wants to speak in support of the application, specifically designated to the new information that was presented this evening. Please exercise the raised hand button next to your name. Once, twice. Seeing none, I will close that portion of the public hearing, and I will open it up to anyone that wants to speak in opposition to the changes that were presented this evening or otherwise express concern. Please raise your hand. Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing, and I will request that staff review the submitted materials and present a supplemental memorandum for our next meeting at, I think it's the 13th.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct.
Okay. with that, I'm going to move to continue this agenda item to the 13th of October. Seconded by Amelia, or question of by Amelia?
Mr. Chair, just a question. Procedurally, will we again take public testimony after that staff memo is issued, or is this the moment? Do we need to leave written comment open right now is what the question I actually need to ask.
I don't feel like we need to leave written comment open. I can, because we've got a couple of weeks until that next meeting. So let me just take a look. The next meeting is the 13th. The Friday before that is the 7th. So I would like to leave written comment open then until noon on the 7th to planning@somervillema.gov.
Sorry. Sarah's lecture got me worked up about making sure we were doing it by the book.
So, so the written comment period will be left open until the 7th. I have moved to continue this item to the 13th, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
John votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Thank you all very much, and I apologize to the applicant, but that's, this is sometimes what we need to do procedurally, because we want to make sure that, we're following our own regulations and our own ordinances. So,
Thank you, members of the planning board. We'll see you on the 13th.
okay, and again, we really appreciate the new information that we got. I think this is gonna solve some of the issues that we identified.
Yeah, we're definitely very excited that Will came up with this. Thank you. Good night.
Will, thank you for the light bulb.
They're very rare. Thank you. I'll see you in a few weeks.
Okay, good night. So the last items on our agenda are the 3 different applications for 50 Webster Avenue in their various iterations, and I believe this is the time at which Amelia needs to recuse herself. Is that right?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will recuse myself.
Okay. Have a nice night, Amelia. See you in a few weeks. Okay, so we have next this is, let's just have the applicant come back to us for all 3, because we're gonna have to take several votes on this if we move forward this evening. So if we could have the applicant team be unmuted and staff as necessary.
This is Raisa speaking. I see 2 Justin Kuntz, who is the speaker for tonight. I will unmute the first one. Justin? You have been unmuted.
Good evening. This is actually Greg Karczewski from US2. Can you hear me?
Yes, Greg.
Terrific. Yeah, I'll be the speaker this evening, supported by some of our design team members in case there are other questions. Love to share my screen if I may.
This is Raisa speaking. You should be able to present now.
Great. Able to see my screen? Terrific. Very good. Good evening. My name is Greg Karczewski with US2. We're the master developer working in partnership with the city and the community on the Union Square revitalization. Excited to be before you again this evening to talk about the 50 Webster project. We put together some materials to respond to the comments that various members of the planning board had from our last session together. We're primarily highlighting some, the information that was included in our application surrounding 3 different areas really: project wind analysis, project glare analysis, and then some questions around mobility and accessibility, both the alley traffic patterns, and then how does the project, and particularly the civic space, interface with existing conditions. So we'll walk through that this evening. First kind of covering the project wind analysis. And so these are some of the highlights of a report that was included as part of our application materials, and an analysis that was performed by a firm called RWDI. For 50 years, they've been working on engineering and analysis to support, building projects. And so they took, modeled our project, and studied it through a wind tunnel test that employed 91 different sensors and wind direction measurements in 36 directions. And they looked at it in the build condition with just our building, and then also a full build condition that assumed the buildings around our project were also completed, that have been identified in our master plan. And so, some of the main points that came out of the work that they did are that no dangerous winds are expected. And in particular, there are no exceedances of Somerville's effective gust criteria, which is a gust occurring more than 1% of the time. And then importantly, there were some questions during our last session about particular areas. I think board member Gino had asked about the bike route along Webster Avenue. And so the purple dots indicate that those are, that's an acceptable, wind condition for those pedestrian uses. Additionally, you'll notice that same condition in the 2 green rooms that are planned, closest to the building. And then less desirable wind conditions were observed at a couple of corners around the building. Those will be areas that we continue to, as we look at planting landscape and figuring out the configuration of landscape, we'll be mindful of those areas. And then it's of note that when the full build condition is completed, all these wind conditions actually improve. So, as the development occurs around the project, the conditions will improve. And so that's the report out on the wind analysis. And then, similarly, RWDI did an analysis of the solar glare on the site, which I think board member Habib and member Capuano had asked about last time we were together. And so the RWDI modeled the building, as you can see in this image down here. Hopefully you can see my cursor, including the larger glass element that we talked about, which is intended to really kind of highlight the historical, use and production of glass on the site. And they took a look at, what are the effects of, solar reflection on the surrounding environment, looked at potential heat and glare impacts on pedestrians, property, and motorists. So of note, landscaping elements were not included in the analysis. And certainly landscaping elements will have an effect in improving solar glare conditions, particularly for pedestrians kind of at the street level. And then I already mentioned that south-facing portion of the building, it was part of the model. And so the conditions, and you can see the various areas that they looked at, from a driver's perspective, a pedestrian's perspective, and kind of from the facade of adjoining buildings perspective. And the opinions that were rendered, some of them were that the reflections created by the building are typical for a contemporary building in an urban center, that there aren't any glare impacts that are expected to propose safety risks to pedestrians or property, and that when there are glare impacts on drivers, the sun would already be in the driver's view, so it's not really being exacerbated by the building. The one area that was noted was the pavilion, that art object that we plan kind of in this zone of the plan within the civic space, because we had some glass and some reflective material on that pavilion and art object, that we should, as we move forward with the design of that object, and I think we indicated last time that we're still kind of working through exactly what that becomes, but to be mindful of the materials that we're selecting to ensure that, we're picking materials that will minimize the reflection. So, that's an output of this report that we'll use as we move forward with the design of that object. And then as we specify, glass throughout the building and work towards final construction drawings, we'll be sure to pick, glass that has the characteristics in terms of transmissions and reflectiveness to ensure that, we either meet or improve upon the results of this analysis. And then the last two portions are really related to mobility and accessibility. And so the first question was really around, how does accessibility work in and around the site? And so, the first point would be that the alley and the vehicular movements that are proposed with our project are consistent with the coordinated development special permit that was in front of you a number of years ago and received a positive vote. And they really serve as the first phase, as we talked about last time we were together, for the D3 block. So that's this alleyway here at the very southern portion of the site. That alley will provide access for deliveries, and will take all those deliveries and vehicles off of the public way into the project site, which is a positive from the way this has been configured. And it's also being planned, this point of entry is being planned coincident really with the current access to the site, and is located as far away from this intersection as is feasible within the site limits, which is also a positive. And then within the site, the points of entry within the site for loading is here at the rear closest to the tracks. Vehicles that are heading into the parking structure or below grade parking garage would go in through this ramp area, which would take them down below. Or if you were dropping someone off, you would turn the corner and drop someone off at this secondary lobby entrance and come back out. So the advantage of this configuration is there's internal queuing available on the site before it would start to impact the Webster Avenue. And then pedestrians are always top of mind. You can see with this blue line, this is the main pedestrian access, the public way that would lead folks from the Boynton Yards neighborhood, up Webster and then up Prospect towards the new Green Line station. In order to prioritize pedestrian access, this crosswalk area at the access point where those vehicular crossings will occur has been improved with a raised crosswalk to prioritize both pedestrian and bicycle movements. And we'll continue to kind of coordinate that, those details as we go into final design and work with the city as Webster Street and the intersection evolves. And then lastly, I think there were questions around pedestrian access in and around the site, and in particular, I believe as board member Gino had asked about crosswalks and also how the crosswalks lined up with some of the internal ramping that's proposed on the site. And so, primary to the design, kind of the starting point for the design was really to think about how do we create the safest and most accessible path along that route that I was just describing to deliver people from Boynton Yards broadly up to the Green Line station. If you've traveled this route today, it's got a narrow sidewalk. And it also, as the design team shared last time we were together, there's a significant grade change that happens as you migrate from the Prospect Street Bridge, which goes over the railroad tracks, to the south here, in excess of 10 feet. So we were, through a lot of work, we were able to create a pathway here that is, 12 feet minimum and wider in a number of locations and meets ADA accessibility requirements. So that was really the primary objective, right? And then as we started to move into the interior portion of the site, we also wanted to make sure that there was very good accessibility for people of all abilities to get into, the green rooms that are being created and to migrate in and around the site. And so you can see, these blue highlighted areas are ramps for accessible access that are, companions to stairs in some instances for able-bodied folks to use. And then lastly, as it relates to the crosswalks, the primary crosswalk being this crosswalk here, you can see how the crosswalk engages into the civic space in a way where there's, a landing area, if you will, and, in both locations where there's crosswalks. And in particular, after working with city staff and some of the folks that are focused on ADA accessibility, the idea of having this ramp sort of line up with that crosswalk was desirable. It was less desirable in this location because we couldn't provide a crosswalk a ramp because of the grade changes that are occurring here. So all these locations were done in close coordination with I think those accessibility considerations in mind, as well as trying to provide as much permeability between this this main public route and the features that are now being designed in this civic space. And then I think the last question that I wanted to make sure we responded to was a question around signage of the plaza. The plaza will be a public space, and as such, we'll be signing it in accordance with the Division of Public Space and Urban Forestry's requirements. As we get into final design, we'll be picking locations, but it'll include, the name, the nature of the space, the hours of operation, and all the relevant details that are required by that division of the city. And so, that's something that, be part of our final design effort. And so, we hope that those details are responsive to the questions that you had last time we were together. And that's really what we had to present tonight. And, welcome any questions you might have. And thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm not sure if staff has any further comments on any of the materials that was presented to us tonight. I would welcome any comments from staff before we entered into a discussion by members of the board.
Mr. Chair, through you, this is Emily Hutchings. I think we're comfortable from a staff level on what's been presented to us. We don't have any further conditions proposed based on the additional information. It's really not additional information. It's just additional description of what was provided initially. I do have my colleagues, Justin Schreiber from the Mobility Division and Courtney Kirk from PSUF here with me if they would like to say anything or if you would have any questions for them. But generally speaking, we're comfortable with what has been presented.
I don't have any questions at this point, but I'm going to open it up to my fellow members to see if you have any comments or questions that you've got at this point. Okay. Yes, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the applicant for this presentation, responding to those questions. I think it's been very helpful. In particular, I agree with mobility and really love how that ADA accessible ramp does line up with, one of the main crosswalks, or really kind of two in the bottom half of the site, and very much understand the challenges with the grade change and not wanting to line up a ramp / slide with the crosswalk close to the Prospect Street Bridge. So this is great. I think, yeah, thank you for the detail. On the wind analysis, I appreciate that the planting conditions will mitigate the sort of moderate impacts that you've shown in those yellow dots. And especially since as the full build happens in this site, the wind will continue to become more favorable as opposed to less favorable. I think that for me is really helpful to hear. I would maybe ask a question to my fellow board members on the sort of planting condition mitigation, on kind of what we've done in the past with these kind of things. So maybe my question or comment is, in these cases where we have a condition that's an impact but will be mitigated by planting as designed, what do we typically do in terms of conditions, if any, to ensure that the planting continues to provide that mitigating effect as the construction documents are developed and the sort of building gets fully fleshed out?
So I don't think we've necessarily had that specific issue come up in my memory, but I think it would be appropriate to either put a condition in or expect that where this is something that is relevant to plantings and the greenery, that they would be in touch with the appropriate city department as the project is moving forward to completion and permitting, to make sure that it actually does in fact comply with what we anticipate and what they've indicated should be the case.
I think I would certainly be more supportive of this project with that kind of condition, if the applicant would be acceptable, or if the applicant finds it acceptable. sort of moving forward, just to, make sure that we're saying, okay, this will get mitigated by landscaping, and that, we give the appropriate city boards and sort of subcommittees, the material that they need to actually make sure that this is mitigated as it moves forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to add that as a condition. We do that type of thing a lot with making sure that before you move forward, that the appropriate city board, even if they don't have to have a formal sign off on it, does have the appropriate input.
Perfect.
So,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Just to respond, I think that just wanted to point out that the conditions of all, are not dangerous or don't exceed any of Somerville's requirements. So this is, you're looking at a gradation here. And so, the idea that we would, as we look at the landscaping, look to improve upon the condition is something that, makes sense to us. But I just want to make it clear that, that it's not a dangerous condition in any way.
No, I appreciate that. So I think the board would be comfortable with a condition that reflected the consultation with the appropriate city department and personnel.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any? Were you done, Aaron? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm all set. If it were a dangerous condition, I think I might be having a different conversation.
Exactly. Does anybody, Debbie or Jahan, do you guys have any questions? Okay. I don't have any questions. I just have a very brief comment. I just want to, again, thank you all for working with staff and with us and with the community to make a series of applications that I think is going to be a great addition to Union Square area. So we have a number of votes that we have to take this evening based on the fact that there are 3 applications for 3 different portions of this project. So the first one we're going to take up is Planning and Zoning 21-060, which is the site plan approval. So following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the zoning ordinance, I move to approve with the conditions laid out in the staff memorandum, site plan approval to develop a 9-story LEED Platinum lab building in the high-rise zoning district. Seconded by Aaron. The chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
We have a unanimous vote on that portion of the application. The next is Planning and Zoning 21-073, which is the site plan approval for the thoroughfare. So following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the ordinance, I move to approve with the conditions laid out in the staff memorandum, the site plan approval to develop a thoroughfare in the high-rise zoning district. Seconded by Aaron. Chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
We have a unanimous vote in support of that application. And the last is Planning and Zoning 21-166, which is the civic space. Following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the ordinance, I move to approve with the conditions laid out in the staff memorandum, the site plan approval to develop a central plaza civic space type in the high-rise zoning district. Seconded by Aaron. Chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
We have a unanimous vote on that application. Congratulations and good luck to the applicant. Thank you again very much.
Thank you. Very much appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
You too. I believe that is the last item on the planning board's agenda. And at 7:45 p.m., I don't think there is any further business before the board. So the chair moves to adjourn until the October 13th meeting, seconded by Jahan. Chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Planning board is adjourned. Thank you all very much. I'll see you in a few weeks.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great night.